What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Nate Diaz headed to Bellator. Recently, Nate Diaz picked up an impressive win over Tony Ferguson in the final fight of his UFC contract. While all signs pointed to Diaz going out to a loss when the UFC booked him to fight Khamzat Chimaev in his final bout, the MMA gods would not be denied. While many thought this was the end for Diaz in the UFC, the former Ultimate Fighter winner was quick to reveal that although he was going to take some time off to compete in other combat sports, he would eventually return to the UFC. With MMA fans wondering what Diaz's next move would be, talks began to shift to a potential move to the WWE after the Stockton superstar was pictured with the royal couple of WWE. It appears now, however, that Bellator CEO Scott Coker took note of Diaz stating in his post-fight Octagon interview that other MMA promotions should get a hold of him and make him an offer if they are interested in signing him. In a recent video, Coker can be seen stating that Bellator and Team Diaz have an open dialogue. One interesting note is that Diaz is technically under UFC contract despite fighting out the final bout on his agreement. After a contract is completed, the UFC has a 90-day period where fighters remain restricted free agents before they're able to accept other offers. Although the promotion recently waived the 90-day waiting period for Jose Aldo, it doesn't look like Diaz will get the same courtesy from the promotion. Do you want to see Diaz make the move to Bellator? Or would you rather see him pursue other endeavors like boxing and jiu-jitsu outside of MMA? Conor McGregor has no interest in Floyd Mayweather rematch. Recently, reports surfaced indicating that former UFC champ Conor McGregor and bitter rival Floyd Mayweather were not only in talks to meet in the ring again, they had nearly reached an agreement. Despite that, it now sounds as though the Notorious One has no interest in meeting his bitter rival inside the ring again. In a recent post on Instagram, the Irish superstar shed some light on the current status of rematch talks with the Money Team, revealing that he was, quote, not interested. The post is accompanied by McGregor landing a brutal uppercut in their bout that left many wondering how Mayweather managed to stay on his feet. This update from McGregor is an interesting one, given that the former UFC featherweight and lightweight champ has expressed several times in recent years that the bout with Mayweather wouldn't be the last time he stepped into the ring. Several years ago in an interview with Ariel Helwani, McGregor revealed that he had his sights set on winning a boxing championship, while admitting that he didn't believe he had to box more than one time to secure gold. With McGregor having no interest in boxing Mayweather, his sights are likely set on his return to the Octagon in 2023 following a devastating leg break in his trilogy bout with Dustin Poirier last year. While many are eager to see McGregor return to the Octagon, others believe that without fully dedicating himself to mixed martial arts, his best days are behind him. Regardless, Mystic Mac has continued to share photos and videos of himself traveling the world and refining his skills, working with his McGregor Fast team on his yacht, as well as with local martial arts schools along his journey. When the former champ returns to the Octagon, do you want to see him jump right back into fighting contenders like Poirier? Or should he opt for some tune-up fights before making a run at the title again? Next up, Anderson Silva opens up on the UFC and Dana White. Although Anderson Silva was at one point considered to be the greatest fighter on planet Earth, his relationship with the UFC has been a rocky one. After parting ways with the UFC in 2020 in the midst of a 3-fight skid, Silva shifted his focus to boxing. After picking up an impressive win over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., he continued his string of dominance inside the ring by knocking out Tito Ortiz in the first round. In anticipation of his upcoming October showdown with Jake Paul in Arizona, Silva spoke on the MMA Hour to discuss the UFC, their contracts, and controversial president Dana White.
What happened when people go to UFC and start talking about, oh, I don't make money and this and that? Because you have a chance to sign or not sign the contract. Your manager, your lawyer, in your team, I need you to take care this part of the business, because sometimes you don't have focus for that or something, but you need to take care because you represent your company.
Silva's comments back up the UFC's official stance regarding their fighters, which is that they are independent contractors rather than full-on employees. Given that, it makes sense that the fighters and their teams are ultimately responsible for the contracts they sign. With that being said, however, some of the fine print in the promotion's contract have earned the promotion considerable criticism, given that fighters can't compete in other combat sports while under contract. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Aljamain Sterling weighs in on UFC's 17-year-old prospect. This week, fight fans saw 17-year-old Raul Rosas Jr. make his highly anticipated debut on Dana White's Contender Series. After picking up a dominant win that saw him earn a UFC contract, the budding star revealed that he had already set his sights on becoming the youngest champion in the history of the UFC. To make the moment even more impressive, Rosas Jr. revealed his intentions to fight a top 5 opponent in his official UFC debut. With only 6 professional fights to his name, the comments understandably caught the attention of UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, who weighed in on the situation, explaining that while he is a fan of the hot prospect, he believes he might want to slow his roll before calling out a top 5 opponent. With how stacked the UFC's bantamweight division is, Rosas Jr. may find himself slightly out of his element. As it stands, the UFC's top 5 bantamweights at the present time are former interim champion Peter Yan, former champion TJ Dillashaw, and streaking prospects Merab Dvalishvili, Corey Sandhagen, and Chito Vera. While Sterling believes that the young prospect will find success at 135 pounds in the UFC, he couldn't help but also point out the fact that once the 17-year-old fills out a bit, he may be better suited for featherweight. Rosas Jr. certainly wouldn't be the first fighter to reach their physical prime and then move up in weight. Top 10 pound-for-pound fighter Dustin Poirier went through something similar several years into his UFC career when he made the move from featherweight to lightweight. With Rosas Jr.'s official UFC debut likely coming sooner rather than later, who do you want to see the budding prospect square off against? Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. Next up, Sean O'Malley doesn't believe Khamzat Chimaev can make 170. Going into UFC 279 fight week, Khamzat Chimaev seemingly had the world in the palm of his hand. As a massive favorite over Nate Diaz, all the streaking prospect had to do was make weight and defeat the massive underdog in order to secure himself a welterweight title shot against the winner of the inevitable trilogy match between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. Of course, as fight week played out, Chimaev's stock dropped considerably as he ultimately missed weight by a whopping 8.5 pounds. With the 3-time Swedish National Wrestling Champion's coach and UFC President Dana White seemed to be in agreement in regards to Chimaev's next bout taking place at middleweight, it sounded as though an eventual return to 170 pounds was inevitable. Despite that, many, including fan favorite bantamweight Sean O'Malley, believe that a cut to welterweight is something Chimaev won't be able to do again.
He's not going to make 170, dude. I just don't see him making. I don't even know if UFC will book him at 170. But it doesn't seem like he wants to go up to 185, which is kind of surprising because he is big and he's super fucking skilled. And he's got to be confident, but see, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if he wants those fights up there.
Yeah.
Those are big boys.
O'Malley also pointed out the fact that prior to his fight of the year contender with Gilbert Burns earlier this year, the streaking prospect needed some help making weight. When he stepped on the scales, Chimaev used an old wrestling trick to make weight, something UFC Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier also admitted to infamously doing. When the privacy towel is being held up in front of a fighter, simply resting your hands on the towel takes off much more weight than anyone would expect. It's an experiment fans at home have continued to try for themselves to see just how easy it is for fighters to get away with simply resting a hand on the towel to lose weight. Given that Chimaev needed to use the trick to make weight and the fact that he recently missed weight for his bout with Diaz, do you think he should fight at welterweight again? Or should he be forced to fight at middleweight for the foreseeable future? And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have UFC commentator Joe Rogan going off on USADA in his recent podcast. Here's what he had to say on his podcast.
I would like to do a piece on weight cutting that the UFC doesn't like.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like weight cutting.
Yeah.
I think it's the worst problem in our sport. I think it's right up there with steroids.
You see,
but I think steroids is barely a problem now because of USADA. USADA's so vigilant. They're horrible, man. They woke up Paulo Costa at fucking 6 in the morning when they did the same thing to Volkanovski. When he was in
I remember that. Then Kamal complained about it.
Yes, that's ridiculous. All that stuff is ridiculous, but weight cutting is horrible.
Do you guys agree with Joe Rogan? Let us know down in the comment section below. Last up, Elizeu Zaleski suspended for 1 year following failed drug test. This just in, UFC veteran Elizeu Zaleski has been suspended for 1 year by USADA stemming from a failed drug test back in April. Since the news surfaced, he has remained adamant that he didn't knowingly take performance-enhancing drugs, with his manager pointing to the incredibly trace amounts of PEDs in his system as indicative of a tainted supplement. Despite that, while he goes through appealing the suspension, he will be sidelined for the immediate future. Fortunately for the vet, other fighters including Sean O'Malley and Marvin Vettori have managed to successfully appeal their suspensions for the exact same banned substance. Whether or not Zaleski finds the same success remains to be seen. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.